And I'll go in so far to say that from Christ to CrossFit, every obscure idea has gone through this path to become a global phenomenon. People listen to you, you have an audience. People buy your service, your product, they listen to you, you have an audience. You bring that audience together to interact with one another, it becomes a community. You bring that community together to create impact that transcends your product or service or your profits, it becomes a movement. And once that movement has undying faith in its purpose through rituals and beliefs, it becomes a cult or a religion. So, let that sink in. Audience, community, movement, religion.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of OmarCumberbatch.com. As always, appreciate you joining in, listening to all the good and new in the health coaching space. And today we have another huge guest in Lloyed Lobo. And Lloyd is just killing it out there. He has a book that just got released. It's called From Grassroots to Greatness. And today we talk about that. It's one of the things that I was really... I can't even describe how many thoughts were popping in my head about how this formula for success is so important in so many different ways. And basically what Lloyd talks about is creating a community. And that's one of the things that I see, and I didn't really know it until he kind of just broke it down and just really listening to what he was describing, is that community is really the thing that takes your business from, good to great. And it's not just about helping, say, individual, say, lose weight or something like that. If you can get people to really get behind a cause and grow that community, that's really where everything begins. It's a fascinating show. I know that you're going to love it. I'm really excited about his book too. I'm in the process of getting my copy as we speak, and I'm going to read it, and I cannot wait to implement it into what I do. And I would hope after all this time that we're kind of a community. And if we're not, it's definitely my fault because I didn't probably do it the right way. So that's why I'm trying to see how I can even incorporate some of these things into what I do in the podcasting world. All these people who are listening to the show, and I thank you for that. As always, we need to come together a little bit more and help each other out and maybe get into something that will grow into a different kind of thing, not just learning about being great health coaches and building our businesses, which is all good too. I mean, we could do a community around that as well, but figure out a way to engage more and communicate and help each other out. So infancy stage, but definitely inspired by this particular podcast with Lloyed Lobo. So I'm very excited to jump into it. But before we do, as always, leave a rating and review on iTunes so I continuously get guests like Lloyd on the show. And I also want to, of course, plug the podcast course and see if anybody is out there who is interested in doing similar things, growing their podcast to a point where you can have an audience and influence, which is very important. And if you know anybody, obviously, who's interested, please share. Would love to get this message out to more people. So let's jump into the show. Hey, Lloyd, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am doing well, my man. Thanks for hosting me. I'm pumped. I love your podcast. I love the people you serve, and I love the overarching theme of health, because if you don't have good health, you won't live long. You won't be there for your business or your family.
No, and I appreciate having you on the show. We had a great off-the-air exchange. I learned a lot about you and what you do, and really excited to share you with my audience. So I just want to dive into it because you have an excellent origin story. It's amazing, I'll be honest. I mean, just being a young refugee in Kuwait, you fled to safety. So I'm just really excited for you. Just even tell us a little bit about that experience and just get to know you a little bit better.
Definitely, man. So the way I tell people when they ask me is, how did you get your start in entrepreneurship? And I tell them, it goes all the way back to me being a refugee of the Gulf War. I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I had this disgusting habit. Like I probably had a reading disability or something, but I would study last minute for exams. And I study for a math exam and I show up and it's a geography exam. I was miserable all summer that I'm going to fail 4th grade. Now think about it, right? Like immigrant family, you don't want to get like fail 4th grade here. And one summer, towards the end of the summer, probably a few weeks from school starting, my mom wakes me up and she's like, hey, I don't think you can go to school anymore. A war has been hit. And my first reaction was, yes, you're never going to find out I failed in my mind. But then when the reality of the situation sank in and I looked at the worry on my mom and dad's face, I'm like, something is up. So that day I go down the building with my dad and I see a whole bunch of concerned faces. Security had lapsed in the country and you weren't sure what's happening. There was extreme uncertainty. Currency is now all of a sudden invalid. Stores are shut. There's looting going on. You can hear bombings. You can hear all these stories that soldiers breaking into homes. So there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and your currency is invalid. And this is a time where there's no phones. So they killed the telecom tower. So it was a very hard time. And, in 2023, when you look around, bad news perpetuates and people just discuss bad news and they belabor on the problem. But this was a time where as I was down the building with my dad, looking around the faces of other people, they weren't belaboring on the problem. They immediately came together and think of solutions like, hey, me and one person are going to guard the building from 6 to 12. And then somebody else is like, okay, I'll guard it with this other person from 12 to 6 in the morning. And somebody else is like, hey, if you guys have a shortage of food or whatever, we'll organize supplies. My cousin owns a convenience store or a grocery chain or whatever. Somebody else is like, we have family members displaced and people started talking about how do we organize shelter. So what happened was each building became a sub-community, communicated with the next building, and the word of mouth spread and it became the largest grassroots movement that evacuated the people to safety. We went from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan on like refugee buses on the highway of death. Right. And that day I experienced two things. One was that whole like experience of fleeing the country was in a way entrepreneurship, right? So what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is taking an obscure idea to execution and impact while dealing with extreme risk and uncertainty. Now, entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily have to be starting a business, although most of it is associated with it. It just has to be, you have an idea, you deal with extreme risk and uncertainty and move with speed and urgency to take it to execution, fruition, and impact. And that's what the Gulf War experience was, the evacuation. Within months, people evacuated the population, they came together, formed this grassroots movement, word of mouth spread, and got people out of there to safety. That was also my first experience with the power of community. And as I grew up, I was craving that. I was always surrounded by communities, and I always had this affinity for risk and uncertainty and taking new ideas to fruition. So that was my formative years. And so a few years after the Gulf War, we moved to Canada, went to university, studied engineering. After I finished engineering, I didn't want to do a job in engineering. I asked a few people like, hey, what's the best skill I can have if I wanted to be a business person like you? And unanimously, I heard from different family members, from other people I knew, is sales. Sales is everything. Sales fixes everything. If you can't sell, you can't do anything. It's what I heard as an entrepreneur. So I started applying for sales jobs, man, and nobody would give me a sales job, right? Awkward engineer. And why do we give you a job? Why do we bet on you? Why don't you just go do the job you went to school for? So I literally begged and fought my way into getting a job cold calling for a small company. I'm like, just let me prove myself. Mm-hmm. And that was my journey. It went from sales, right? Cold calling there. And my parents were so embarrassed, immigrant parents, right? They're like, my son studied engineering and he's making like barely $30,000 cold calling. And our friends' kids are at Microsoft and all of this stuff after engineering. So embarrassing. But fast forward today, it's the best skill I could ever learn. I'm everything I am because of that skill, selling or ability to communicate. And so the next job from Canada, I moved to the States because my girlfriend, then wife now, was in medical school. And so I went there on a visa. And I landed a job in sales for a software company. Little did I realize that that wasn't really a sales job, because we needed to figure out what to build and how to market it. So it went from thinking they had a baked product that I need to sell to talking to customers, figure out their pain points, understand what to build, then communicate what to build to the developers. So wireframing, designing, all of that, and then market it, learn everything about marketing and sales, and then package the website and all of that. Now, like a lot of people, or they would have probably backed out and like, this is not the job I signed up for. I'm not getting paid to do this. Not only I didn't do that, but I actually forced myself to learn anything. But I actually didn't have any option. I went to the US on a visa. So I'm like, it's not like I can quit. So let me make the most of the situation. I want to be with my girlfriend and I don't want to go back. So I started learning, man. I started learning everything about sales. Now, luckily I knew engineering, so I knew how to at least translate customer requirements to engineers. But I needed to learn how to communicate at a high level with customers. They had big clients like Tiffany, Armani, Simon & Schuster. I needed to learn about marketing and sales. I didn't know anything. And so then that was like, my second or third experience with community is that everything I started researching was from the HubSpot inbound marketing community. And HubSpot didn't really have a marketing automation software back then. They had a community, inbound marketing. And so I started going to their meetups and taking their inbound marketing courses, and everything I learned about marketing was from them. So that was my journey. And if I reflect back, the key summary of the two most important learnings, if you want to be an entrepreneur, number one is communication. Mm-hmm. Everything from convincing your wife to, hey, let me do this failure after failure. I'm not going to pay the bills for the first couple of years, to convincing customers, to convincing early employees, to convincing the media, to convincing podcasters, to convincing investors. It's all communication. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't realize this, but if you can't communicate, you can't connect with people. And so what is the reason why I went into sales is because the only way to get better at something when you suck at it is to keep doing it, right? It's like chiseling a block, a sculpture. You mm-hmm. start with like heavy and then you go finer and finer. There's no job on the planet that's going to force you to talk to customers and improve your communication as much as selling, right? What other profession is there? Because here you're polishing your messaging, you're pivoting on the fly, you're learning to negotiate, and this is not something you do once a week. You do several times a day. Your livelihood depends on it. So I said, I'm going to put myself in a situation, if I want to be a business person and communication and selling is the key thing, I'm going to put myself in a situation where I'm forced to communicate every single waking hour of the day. And initially it sucked, man. Like, I think the first cold call I made, I spent 4 hours prepping for it. And then somebody said hello and I hung up and the whole team started laughing. And I'm sure that's happened to a lot of us. But then over time, you just show up, right? Consistency is the secret ingredient that turns small actions into big outcomes. So again, you want to get better at anything, just do it and do a lot of it. Like, you want to get better at writing, like on social media or content creation or whatever it is, create that first video and post it. It's going to suck, but then do the next one and do the next one and research other creators you love and you admire and read their content, consume the content, consume, create, but put yourself to create. You look at Mr. Beast, he's an iconic brand, right? He's a cult-like phenomenon. He didn't start with polished videos. You got to look back at his first 100 videos. A lot of them sucked, but what he didn't do was stop. He kept showing up and showing up and showing up and showing up. So that is one. The ability to communicate is key. The ability to create is key. and being consistent is key. So these three learnings, if you can communicate, you can connect with anybody. If you can create, you basically live life to your communication, right? You now, what you're doing through words comes to life when you can create, and people can consume what you create in a much more easier fashion. And if you're consistent, boom, like you know, I personally think schools are overrated. My wife's a doctor. She believes otherwise. And we have a lot of debate on this. But I'm like, pick any skill you want on the planet. Learn to do it really, really well. Learn to communicate, learn to create, and just be consistent. You will explode in a few years, and it'll look like an overnight success.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with all those points. And one of the things that I mean, you have like a perfect story where you married so many different skill sets over the years, and like you look like an overnight success as well. But you did kind of mention that you were not good at this stuff, so I just want you to even just give a little bit more of a little story or a little advice tidbits on just your recognition, because that takes a lot to recognize that, okay, you know what, I may not be that good. Like that's a skill set in itself where you're saying, okay, I'm going to grow and learn in that space. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. In terms of, how do you mean recognition?
Well, you seem to at least have the idea that you needed to improve. There's a lot of people who like, okay, they don't want to improve, or they think it's got to either just come easy to them, and they're just, if it doesn't come easy, they'll just turn their back from it. So you definitely recognize, okay, right now maybe I don't have all the skills that I need, and I'm going to sit here and acquire them. So that's a very important mindset as well.
You know, part of being an immigrant is all your life people tell you you're not good enough. Right? You're always getting licked by your parents. You're always your uncles, your neighbors, or I saw your kid here, I saw them there, teachers. Everyone's always putting you down, man. And so when everyone's always putting you down, you can't ever feel that you're the greatest of all time, right? So you know that you're a deficiency. And then over time, you start developing this PTSD that, you know what, I'm missing this, I'm missing that. And there's two ways to approach it. One, you're like, I'm not going to fix anything. And I'm telling you, the best way to remain status quo is do nothing. Like just be yourself and you keep doing it.
Yeah.
But everything great is on the other side of risk, uncertainty, and pain. Pain is the precondition for growth, right? If it's like going to the gym. So like the health coaches are going to appreciate it. If I keep moving the same weight every single day, week in, week out, I'm not going to get stronger. Your mind's the same way. If you don't lift a heavier load with your mind, you're not going to get mentally stronger. You're not going to achieve greater heights, right? And so you got to understand, hey, what are the things that are uncomfortable for me? I actually like taking on new things. I feel like I'm a 0 to 1 person. So after I left the day-to-day of my company, moved to the board, I decided to write a book. Why did I decide to write a book? I hated writing. The hardest thing for me to do is read and write. And I said, I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to conquer this. And for the longest time, you know, like, people told my mom, oh, your son doesn't have a master's. You know, he's not educated enough. He did, you know, he finagled his way through engineering, barely made it. And I'm like, you know what? When this book becomes a bestseller, copy number 1 is for my mom, the hard copy printed, is that, you know what? You didn't raise me wrong. And the people that told you that I'm not educated enough, or, you know, I barely made it, and you know, I got lucky and all of this stuff, I wrote a book. And the world's reading it.
Right.
Or that master's or PhD I didn't do. But it was very hard. It took me 2 years. Maybe for somebody else, it takes 6 months, because it was incredibly hard for me to write. And it was even harder for me to read. So I had to write. And I fell and I got up and I fell. It was just a very hard process. And so if you look at it, taking a first job in cold calling after you finish engineering, how many people are going to do that? Right? Because you forego the salary and then you take on something that's completely out of your comfort zone. But the way to win in life is to bet on the skills that are going to carry you far into the future and not just for today. If you keep doing just for today, you're going to be, the university has done a great job putting you on the hamster wheel, right? Mm-hmm. So you're on a hamster wheel. They've given you a job. Mm-hmm. They've created basically a job for you, or they've inserted you in the system. The university is the best way to get you in the system. And what happens in the system? You work 60, 70 hours a week. You wake up a few hours early to get to work early. If you have kids, to get them ready, drop them. You leave late, drop your kids. You're paying between sales tax, property tax, federal tax, and state tax. More than half your paycheck is gone, right? If you have a car payment, that too. And now you're spending the whole week running around. You have just enough energy to have one nice meal on the weekend. And Sunday is spent grocery shopping and planning for the rest of the week. I still have Sunday PTSD. Yeah. And then you have just enough money left to have a 2-week vacation a year. All through this time now, you're eating a crappy processed diet, which is not good for you. And then you retire at 65 and you die in your mid-late 70s. And those years are barely functional. And so you spend so much time chasing. That is status quo. Go to university, get a job, work through the ranks. That's how you get inserted into the system. Not that there is anything wrong with it. The system works for 90% of the system. The world needs a system, right? Mm-hmm. But if you want to transcend the system and be in the 1% that has the ability to do what you want, where you want, when you want, and with whom you want, then you got to punch above your weight class, right? Then you got to take on challenges that are going to be uncomfortable for you. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to grow, you're going to know more, you're going to transcend new heights. And for every time you fall, you get stronger because you've taken on a new challenge. And that's the reality of life, right? Is the world is made up of, the system is the status quo. And then there's the people who live differently. So you got to make the decision, do I want to live differently or do I want to be status quo? And the only way to live differently, everything has a leading indicator. The only way to live differently is to understand that, one, what you're doing right now is status quo. 2, how do you break the status quo? 3, what deficiencies do you have to break that status quo? And then go do something about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, this is a really motivational topic. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about your whole story. And it's interesting because you did take on like what you learned in Kuwait to create these communities and create effective communities. And these are things that are done by huge brands like Harley-Davidson, Nike, Peloton, and they take advantage of this approach. So my big question is, what is the community-led growth model and how does it apply to health coaches who do have like lots of smaller businesses and they're trying to get off the ground?
Definitely, man. So, in 2023, marketing is taking a bloodbath, right? It costs twice as much to generate the same results. CPMs are up, as you know. Mm-hmm. And everything in general is more expensive. And consumers are tired, right? Consumers are tired of seeing the same ads, the same clickbait, the same data, the same messaging. And with generative AI, what's happening is people are putting stuff into ChatGPT, and now you start seeing same content. If you don't edit it and change it, now, like in a few months itself, what's coming from ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. How do you stand out in the sea of sameness? It's not technology, right? As you know, yesterday's innovation is always tomorrow's commodity. Mm-hmm. But if you look at a company like Harley-Davidson, when the Japanese manufacturers started commoditizing electronics, it almost went bankrupt. And the Harley management team said, we're going to build the company around the ethos of community. It wasn't a marketing strategy. And this is what happens is like we tend to look for marketing saviors. But really, if you want to make a change, it has to come from the top. It has to come from within. And so Harley made community a company strategy. They sent their leadership out in the public to create these Harley Writers Clubs. Employees became writers, writers became employees. The community grew, and over time they created like the Save Harley movement, and now created the Save breast cancer, save people from breast cancer, cure people from autism, and all of these things, right? So as I was writing this book, From Grassroots to Greatness, 13 Rules to Build Iconic Brands with Community-Led Growth, I talked to about 1,000 or so people. I joined several communities, all kinds, fitness communities. I joined coaching communities. I joined entrepreneurship communities as a fly on the wall, as a member, basically being involved. I joined Nas Daly's Creator Accelerator program. So I learned a lot. And then I also talked to some of the most iconic and high growth startup brands that have been community led. And not only I found 13 common rules, which I'll share in a second how it applies to coaches, but actually I found 4 paths, right? A 4-step path that is common to every obscure idea that eventually became a worldwide phenomenon. And I'll go in so far to say that from Christ to CrossFit, every obscure idea has gone through this path to become a global phenomenon. People listen to you, you have an audience. People buy your service, your product, they listen to you, you have an audience. You bring that audience together to interact with one another, it becomes a community. You bring that community together to create impact that transcends your product or service or your profits, it becomes a movement. And once that movement has undying faith in its purpose through rituals and beliefs, it becomes a cult or a religion. So, let that sink in. Audience, community, movement, religion. And so I'll give you an example of how we use it at Boast, because we're an obscure idea, right? What Boast does, Boast AI, my company, is me and my co-founder, Alex, we started the company to automate access to government funding for innovative businesses. We get you money for product development from the government. Very boring service, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll distill down the learnings from the book, because we didn't follow like a set path. We stumble upon it, but we built community that eventually helped us bootstrap not only to 10 million in revenue at a very high 80% gross margins, but also our investors came to it. And over time, between debt and equity, we took over 100 million in capital, right? And our investors came to it. Our biggest customers, our partners came through it. So the first thing you got to think about before you build a community is, do you have the DNA for giving? Because if you don't have the DNA for giving or helping others, you'll always look to monetize and you won't sustain it for the long haul. Like if you can't give, if you can't help, and you don't draw joy from helping others, don't do it, because there's cheaper ways, right? You can run ads, maybe, because the community takes a long time. You can run ads, you can cold call, you can do sales, you can do any number of things, you can generate referrals. But community building starts with giving. So you need to have the DNA of giving. So align on values, right? So for Boast, although we helped companies get money from the government, innovative companies get money from the government, our value was not automating government funding or tax credits. It was helping innovators change the world. That was the purpose. So figure out what your purpose is. Your purpose is the forever. Like it'll die and it'll live beyond you. Your purpose will live beyond your life. So if you die, the next person will carry on. So what is your forever, your purpose? So for us, it was innovators, helping innovators change the world. Why? Every dollar spent in innovation returns 20 to the economy. Vaccines, robots, clean drinking water is a function of innovation. Yet in the last 15 years, more than 50% of the Fortune 500 companies have evaporated because they can't innovate. And 90% of the innovations die on the vine. So that was our purpose, helping innovators change the world. And our vision was to accelerate innovation, and our mission, your vision is what will the world be as a function of you doing what you do. The mission is how you do it. And it started with funding and know-how. and today Boast is an R&D funding and R&D intelligence company. So we'll give you the money to do product development and R&D, and we'll give you the know-how in terms of how you do it. And then our values were like, one of the key values of a community-led company is connection, connecting people, being connected to people. 2 is autonomy. You don't want to control, right? You want to let people take charge. If you try to micromanage people, they check out. 3 is mastery, helping people get better and better at their craft. 4 is purpose, having a great purpose that's beyond profits. 5 is energy. Energy is everything, man. Like, imagine if I came here and I was just monotonous and falling asleep on the call, you'd probably hang up in like 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
People need energy, because energy is what connects your purpose and turns it into passion. You want to turn purpose into passion, infuse some energy into it. And then the last one is recognition, because humans are not robots, right? Ultimately, every big innovation and every big success is driven by people. And if you don't appreciate and recognize people proactively, no matter how big or small, they're going to check out. They won't keep coming back for more. So that is, figure out your values. Number 1, connection, autonomy, mastery, purpose, energy, recognition. The second thing is figure out an underserved niche and identify their pains. Figure out where they eat, breathe, drink, sleep. What are their aspirations and goals? So you can help them become the best versions of themselves. So like, you're a health coach, but go one deep. Don't just take broad clients. Is there an underserved niche? Maybe you're a health coach for, entrepreneurs in New York City, or you're a health coach for Fortune 500 executives, mid-level executives. Start there, because what happens is when you have that underserved niche, you can communicate with them and you can bring them together, and they'll feel like it's their tribe, right? You can create very specific content for them. Otherwise, you're having the same content, like how 5 supplements you need to take, or full body workouts. Like, you're gonna try the same generic things, right? Mm-hmm. But then executives in a fast-paced environment in a Fortune 500 company probably have different needs, because their lives are busier. They sleep little, right? So it's like, how do you now cater your advice to them? So figure that niche out. Once you figure that niche out, write the circle of influence around them, meaning, who do they fund? What other tools they pay for? Those other tools they paid for could be your partners, right? So you could collaboratively run content together. So if they pay for like other fitness apps or other fitness tools or other services, you can partner with them. You can create, like, I'll promote your podcast, you promote mine, that sort of thing, right? You could co-host events together. Figure out who they follow, who are the influencers they respect, and invite them. Those influencers then become your, like, people you want to interview on your podcast or invite to your meetups, kind of thing. And then the last one is, what do they frequent? Meaning, what events they go to, what magazines they read, what podcasts they watch, what platforms they're present on. So once you have that, hey, if I understand my audience and I know where they eat, breathe, dim, sleep, who are the influencers, I have the circle of influence. So I could create a strategy where I could dominate their circle of influence. Then you figure out what kind of community you want to build. There's 3 kinds of communities. A community of practice is learning together, helping them learn about a specific field so they become better and better at it. There's a community of product, which is teaching them about a specific product, which is not relevant to health coaches maybe, but even if it is, if you have like 10, 20 customers, you don't want to bring them together around a product, because they're going to be turned off. Like, you're trying to sell me stuff now in addition to your coaching. And the third one is community of play, bringing people together to have a good time. So if your health coach is, your community you build is probably a combination of 1 and 3, a community of practice and play, right? And then now the third step is, you have all this information. How do you create a community? The first step of community is always an audience. So how do you start building that audience? Through content. So you know where your audience hangs out, where they eat, breathe, drink, sleep, what their niche is. So start creating niche specific content. And to do this, maybe you have to write down 100, 200 burning questions that your niche audience has. So you have a repository of ideas. Like think, hey, if I had to write a book on this topic, the ultimate guide to XYZ, what are the chapters, sub-chapters, and topics it would include? Then now you can start creating content specific to that niche. Because you know now that it's a specific audience, you can do role play. So when people watch your videos or read your content, they can feel they're a part of it. They feel like it's targeted to them, right? Like a frustrated, busy, working professional in New York City that doesn't have the time to work out, and like you make some memes out of it and things like that. So start creating content on a cadence. And the one form of content you create, try to multi-purpose it. So it's like YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Insta Reels. Maybe you can turn it into tweets and so on. So just distribute it on multi-channels and keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And you'll start to build an audience, no matter what's small, even if you have 100, 200, 300 people. Now, once you have that, start bringing people together in person, man. Like start hosting a meetup or two. Right? Everyone from like Red Bull to Peloton to CrossFit does that. Start bringing people together. And it doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to host a 5,000 person event or a 1,000 person event. That takes a long time to plan. But you can host like weekly fitness get-togethers, right? Where you throw some healthy food, which costs very little to sponsor. And over time, if you have this circle of influence, you'll have other partners who'll sponsor your, I don't know, you can get barbells, which I love, by the way. This protein bar is delicious. You can get like someone like barbells or any of the other fitness products, healthy fitness products to sponsor and leave their stuff there and bring people together to hang out, right? To hang out, do a quick workout or exchange ideas, roundtables like over working out, hiking, biking, whatever it is, right? And once you start bringing people together on a cadence, man, magic happens. So now you've created this online content. So you start building this audience. Then you start bringing people together in person, maybe every week, maybe every other week. And then your community starts to build. And then if you want to take that further, then now you're like, hey, community, we're coming together and we're hanging out. Let's go and help and support a cause. Which tied to your greater purpose and value. And now your community comes together to, run and donate somewhere or work out and do a challenge to, cure something. And they keep doing that and the word of mouth spreads. And that's how you go from audience to community to movement. And in terms of how Boast did it, like I said, we started with our values, innovators, helping them change the world. When we started going and spending time in these communities, these startup communities, we were startup founders as well. We knew all the content was very high level platitudes from CEOs. It wasn't very specific, like how do I get my first customers? How do I get my first investors? How do I build my first product? None of that content existed, or nobody was talking about it. So we were like, you know what? Why don't we just host these meetups? And we started hosting meetups. The one thing we knew being a part of the startup circle was we knew other founders. And everyone else organizing these startup events were mostly event organizers. So that's why they didn't understand the pulse of the founders. So we started inviting these successful entrepreneurs to talk about how they did their first X. How I got my first customers? How did I validate the idea? How did I get my first employees? Pitfalls to watch, etc. And now, rather than emailing people and saying, hey, buy my stuff, it was like, hey, we're hosting a meetup. 10 people are, we got 10 spots, no cost to you, just pizza and good conversations. Influencer X, again, from that, who do they follow? Who do they frequent? Who do they fund? That circle of influence map. You figure that out, right? And we brought that person. And so their instant reaction was yes. The first meetup we did, 10 people showed up. Then 10, 15, 20, we kept doing it on a cadence. And at the same time, to build that audience, I was writing content. So at the time, podcast wasn't big and LinkedIn wasn't big at all. I used to write a newsletter. I used to write a weekly column called Startup of the Week in the local newspaper. And that local newspaper didn't pay me. They didn't have a freaking column. They weren't covering startups, but I begged them and convinced them. Again, see, communication is very important to convince people that if they let me have this column, I would write every week and I would bring buzz to the startups, and startups are the future, basically. And at that time, nobody cared about startups, man. Like, no accountant, banker, lawyer want to service like small business startups. And so I was bringing buzz to it. And that was the play. You got to bet on an industry that will be big in the future and be right? If you bet on an industry that's from yesterday, then you got to make sure that industry is going to grow, because it might very well be changing or decaying. And so we bet on startups, and we begged the local newspaper to give us a column that we'd write every week. And rain or shine, I wrote that for 2.5, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were building the audience by writing that column and going to events. And then we were doing these meetups, and 10 people would show, 20, 30. One day, man, 200 people showed up in the co-working space. We hijacked the whole co-working space. And the GM of the co-working space is like, listen, this is no longer a pizza night meetup. This is a full-blown conference. And that eventually turned into the Traction conference and the Traction community.
Wow.
And today Traction has 120,000 subscribers. And we do a podcast. At peak, we were doing 2 live webinars a week, like coaching with CEOs of billion-dollar companies. And then we would take that recording and put it to YouTube, and take the audio and put it to podcast. And so we were doing like 2 a week, but right now it's every other week podcast, and we got 3 million views on YouTube, and 120,000 subscribers, and we do a big conference, and wrote a book on building community. But honestly, none of this is complicated, right? It doesn't sound complicated, but this is the path that all these brands, from Harley to Red Bull to Mr. Beast, have taken. It's what's complicated or hard to do is be consistent when you're not seeing results.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. I'm listening to you. I'm fascinated by just, you guys have no idea how much my brain is like it's firing on all cylinders. But yeah, the whole thing was the consistency. You just demonstrated that, you did that newsletter for 2 to 3 years, and that's just what it is. It's just like podcasting. It's, nobody's listening to it when you first start out, right? And it's just over time, it incrementally builds, and you just get traction. And like you said, consistency is really the key to anything.
Exactly. Consistency. Jason Lemkin, who's a revered entrepreneur, wrote the foreword in my book, and his quote was, "Consistency is the secret ingredient that turns small actions into big outcomes."
Amen. So, Lloyd, I usually go about 30 to 40 minutes, and we unfortunately hit that time, which just means that you were phenomenal. Absolutely. And we need a part 2. So
Definitely. Let's do that in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for hosting me. My book, From Grassroots to Greatness, 13 Rules to Build Iconic Brands with Raving Fans, is on pre-sale on Amazon. I put it for 99 cents, the digital. If you want a collectible copy, it's full color. You can get the hard copy, but I put it up for 99 cents. So it's accessible. I could have put it for free, but the thing is, if I put it for free, then people can't leave reviews. Amazon wants verified purchases. So I'm like, 99 cents, it kills the barrier. We'll leave that for as long as possible. And then if people like it, they can buy the full color. It's like a collectible, a gift that you can give. And I'll have a lot of bonus content on fromgrassrootstogreatness.com. So check it out, and hopefully you can leverage it as a tactical playbook to build and scale your community. I'd end with this: fall in love with your customer and make them successful beyond your product or service. If you build a community, you won't become a commodity.
Amen. So also, Lloyd, if you can just, give me your website and social media handles so that we can also follow you in those avenues as well.
Definitely. So I'm on LinkedIn. It's Lloyed Lobo. There's an E in my name, LLOYED. And a lot of business advice there. I recently started an Insta account. I didn't have it at all, but I'll start posting there too. And it's Lloyd Lobo as well, LLOYED Lobo. And then the website is fromgrassrootstogreatness.com or lloydlobo.com. Either diverts to the same spot.
All right. Appreciate you jumping on. Have a great rest of the day.
You too, man. Take care.
Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.